The Kennedy family is one of the most known political families throughout American history. Not only was John F. Kennedy the nation's youngest president, but his grandpa was the mayor of Boston. His father was an ambassador to Great Britain. His brother was U.S. Attorney General. His youngest brother was elected into Senate, and his sister was an ambassador to Ireland. His only surviving child, Caroline Kennedy, takes after the rest of her family and was named the U.S. Ambassador for Japan by Barack Obama. America had reached a triumph because John F. Kennedy was ready to make a change in America. He fought for both civil rights and equality for either gender. He was very generous. In fact, he donated his entire presidential salary to charity. When he was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22, 1963, it was a tragedy to the whole country as they heard about the assassination. JFK is missed very much to this day, but he still leaves a mark on America. On May 29th, John F. Kennedy was born in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, as the second child of the family. John F. Kennedy came from a large family of 9 kids. The Kennedy children grew up in a wealthy family and ended up wealthy as adults. Being the second oldest, he was seen as an example to the rest of his family. After graduating from Choate, a boarding school, he entered Harvard, where his older brother was already attending. Towards the end of college, Kennedy joined the U.S. Navy as a lieutenant and fought during World War II, as well as his brother. Over the summer, when Kennedy traveled in Europe with his dad, he found a lot of interest in politics, just like his brother, Joe. In fact, Joe encouraged his brother to run for senator. Unfortunately, on August 12, 1944, Kennedy's brother Joe died in a plane crash while in the military. On September 12, 1953, Kennedy married Jacqueline Lee Bover, soon to be Kennedy. They were happily married and had 2 children until the assassination of John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy became the 35th President of the United States in 1960. He had reached a huge triumph as President of the United States of America after a close campaign. Kennedy's slogan was "A time for greatness." Though his opponent, Richard Nixon, won the popular vote, Kennedy won more electoral votes. Kennedy was the youngest man and first Roman Catholic to become president. On April 17, 1961, America sent 1,400 CIA-trained Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Fidel Castro. The invasion quickly ended in failure, and many men were killed or captured. Kennedy had to negotiate with Castro for the release of these prisoners. After this, Cuba created an alliance with the Soviet Union, and the Soviets placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. This was known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy then had to negotiate with the Soviet Union and promised to never attack Cuba again, and to remove missiles placed in Turkey by the U.S. Despite what happened between America and Cuba, Kennedy had many accomplishments during his presidency, such as starting the Peace Corps, putting the first Americans on the moon, and advancing civil rights. The Peace Corps was an opportunity for volunteers to help in an underdeveloped country with services such as building and teaching in schools, setting up water and sewer systems, and developing better agricultural methods. On May 25, 1961, Kennedy announced before the decade was over that America would send a man to the moon and return him safely to the Earth. Americans doubted NASA's ability to carry this through, but during his presidency, NASA worked towards achieving this goal. On March 6, 1961, Kennedy signed a form that stated, "The government must treat any employee equally no matter their race or color." One other significant accomplishment was the Equal Pay Act that was established on June 10, 1963. The goal of the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was to abolish different wages depending on gender. Almost 2 years had passed of Kennedy's presidential term, and at 12:30 on November 22nd, Kennedy was shot. Kennedy was visiting Dallas, Texas for a parade. He and his wife were both riding in a Lincoln Continental car. People were crowded along the streets to see the president. The motorcade turned onto Elm Street, where a shot was fired that missed the president. At first, people didn't quite know what happened, but something didn't feel right. A second shot and then third shot were fired that hit him in the back of his head, causing brain matter to be blown out. He was rushed to the Parkland Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Charles Crenshaw tried to save him despite his fatal injury. He was pronounced dead at 12:57. Though there are many conspiracies, Kennedy's shooter was Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was a quiet man from New Orleans who joined the U.S. Marines in 1956. He was a skilled shooter, but got in trouble multiple times with the Marines for carrying an illegal weapon and being violent. In 1959, he left the military and moved to the Soviet Union, where he met his wife. They returned to the U.S. in June 1962 with their newborn daughter. Oswald had an interest in communism and supported Cuba. He worked at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas. It was from this building that he shot the president. After Oswald assassinated Kennedy, he died just 2 days later from a gunshot wound. His shooter, Jack Ruby, murdered him out of anger as Oswald was being escorted to prison. Though many people were angry about Oswald murdering Kennedy, it frustrated people to never understand why he committed such a public murder of the president. Jack Ruby was then sentenced to death a few months later. After Kennedy was assassinated, teachers stopped classes to share the bad news, and people would openly cry with each other on the streets. Lyndon B. Johnson became the president on November 22nd after the assassination of Kennedy. Kennedy has still left a mark on our world to this day. One example would be that he helped initiate the mission to the moon. On May 25, 1961, Kennedy announced that America would put a man on the moon within the decade. And on July 20, 1969, the landing of Apollo 11 on the moon achieved President Kennedy's goal. Another great thing that people still remember about Kennedy is that he shared his wealth with other people and that he donated all of his presidential salary to charity. Charities that benefited from his generosity were the Boy and Girl Scouts of America, United Negro College Fund, and the Cuban Families Committee. Though Lee Harvey Oswald was convicted of Kennedy's murder, many people question if Oswald was a lone gunman or if a larger group planned his assassination and that Oswald was chosen to carry the murder out.